Welcome to the press conference with Italy coach Luciano Spalletti. As usual, if you couldn't raise your hand, please. First question here in the second row to the lady in white. If you can pass the microphone.
Monica Vanali Medias. Luciano, te la devo fare la domanda. Te la senti ancora di stare...
Luciano, I have to ask you this question. Do you still feel in a position to be Italy head coach? And what future does this team have? That question's only natural. Don't feel guilty about asking me that question, but that comes to the crux of the matter. It doesn't change anything for me in the sense that I have the responsibility for what's happened, because the responsibility is mine. I picked the players. And of course, this is part of a process where I need to get to know players. I'm not happy with the performance we produced tonight. I'm not happy with our performance against Spain. I'm partially happy with the other two matches we played. But we were under par in those two games, tonight and against Spain. But on the other occasion, I thought it was down to me having really barked at them in training, having worked them really hard and challenged them on the training ground. This time I actually rested them up and changed the team. Whereas in the previous game, I actually blamed it on myself, regardless of general team selection. I actually blamed myself for not making too many changes, because having to try and keep that high intensity. But it also came down a little bit to how our league season ended. But otherwise, you know, it always looks like you're clutching at straws and looking for excuses. But recently we have tried to train the players in a certain way to put on training sessions that have that intensity, that have those very quick recovery runs. Because there are training methods that can allow you to improve. In terms of that, I wasn't overly happy with our responses on the training ground. But these are the players I've picked, and therefore it's on my head in terms of what's happened. But this is part of a process, and I have to say this, because otherwise it might seem that I'm looking to justify things in a certain way, but all of the other coaches had 20 matches in charge before they took charge of a Euro. Some coaches had 30 games. I only had 10. And we already were under fire. You have to win. You have to win. In the last 3 games against North Macedonia, we hadn't actually won those games against North Macedonia, and yet I had to beat North Macedonia to get us here, and it's only right that we have to win. But I probably need to get to know my team a bit better, to be able to set things up better. We've also had a number of players who sustained injuries, players that I was counting on. And tonight we saw in terms of intensity that we were under par. And Switzerland are worthy winners. I don't know what to say to you. If you want to ask me the question, you want to phrase it slightly better. The future of the Italian national team comes down to actually making different choices. We now need to act differently. We need players with a bit more physicality. When you think you can play via quality, and you've got the quality in the side, but then in terms of tempo, you actually lose that intensity and you can't sustain it over the course of 90 minutes, it's only natural that you then need to try and mix things up and bring in a bit more physicality. Because we saw in those one-against-one duels that we struggled. And that makes the difference in terms of winning the ball back. Because if you win the ball back, but then, and the ball is pinged forward 80 yards, you need to be quick to track back and cover 80 yards on the pitch. It's not about technique in that case.
Buonasera Spalletti, Marcello di Dio Giornale. Volevo, alla luce di quello che ha chiesto anche la collega, volevo sapere se...
Given what my colleague has just asked you, I wanted to ask you, should the team not have been could you not have been a bit braver in terms of your team selection and even run the few risks of actually going out in the group stage and actually had a look at some new players? You're saying bravery in terms of team selection, is that what you're saying? With the young players? At the start, people were saying to me, oh, you're picking Calafiori from the start, what, without any... But Calafiori came through because I brought him here. Fagioli played because I think he's got what it takes. I will make mistakes, but we have experimented a little bit. Destiny Udogie got injured. If there are young players with the potential in order to leave the other guys out on the bench, then I'll be the first to try and find the space to fit them in the team. But having tried out a number of things over the course of this experience, I do come away with the notion that I have to change things. I'm convinced of that. I have to change things now. It's not a scandalous result as now you're trying to depict it to be. My passion is symptomatic of just the utmost respect I have for everyone, because that's what respect means to me. Respect means showing passion and also taking responsibility for the passion that you actually possess. And when it's put to me, and when I'm told that we produced a scandalous performance against Croatia, no, I'll say no. Today we're under par. Against Spain we were under par, but not against Croatia. We made it through a tough group, I think deservedly so. However, we didn't see a team that's defined in terms of fundamentals, in terms of the foundations that we can actually build upon. We need to actually have a look at the canvas that I've actually chosen. And that's what we've learned from this experience at Euro 2024. Good evening. What struck us this evening, looking at you, watching the game up from the stands, wasn't necessarily the performance. Yesterday you asked the team to make a step up psychologically and emotionally. Why did the team never really switch on? It felt like the team were really struggling emotionally. They were in turmoil. I think the team were timid in terms of the intensity of the game. We didn't do a good job. We weren't able to maintain a high level of intensity. And as I was saying earlier, then you have to pick the team. And when you're not able to win the ball back, given that we don't possess a lot of pace at the back, you need to actually afford them space on the pitch, because we don't have really quick defenders who can then cover lots of space in behind to quickly chase back and get their shape back the right way. So therefore, you need to afford the opposition a bit of space. Occasionally we won the ball back, but then we lost possession because we didn't do a good job of keeping the ball. What happened tonight didn't come down to one single cause, but you can play in a number of different ways. You can play with all sorts of different personnel, but if that's the tempo, if you don't do something more in terms of tempo and intensity, it becomes a lot hard to actually compete on an even footing. And we were under par in terms of our intensity. As your colleague said earlier, the other time we said we didn't have the right intensity. I said I picked the wrong team because I picked the same 11. I didn't allow them time to rest up because people were breathing down my neck. You know, I need to get out there, high tempo training session, come on, come on, come on. Whereas tonight I made 6 changes, I think, compared with the previous starting 11. How many of them were? 6 were there? 6 players, because I wanted to do this and I allowed those players to be fresh, and yet the tempo was the same. A bit that was because of the tempo, the rhythm of the game, but also because other players aren't necessarily able to be consistent in terms of how they link up with the team, how they operate within the team, whether they run a yard more, a yard less. Now I wait, I jockey, now I go. Really being a living, breathing part of the situation at hand. And then you saw that we are under par in terms of pace for individual players, in terms of what you need to compete in a match such as this. So I need to get a handle on that. You said you don't want to resort to any excuses. Credit to you for that. You said the other day that you only know one way of playing football, and yet you've made it clear that there aren't enough players that are able to carry out your game plan. But there's something else that you said on television. You said that there are things that pertain to how the league season finished. And you said it's not easy to play in this heat. This was a long season for everyone, not just for the Italian players. And everyone has to deal with the heat, you know, the Swiss too. Look, I was alluding to something else. Inter won Serie A, and then I made sure that they are a very professional, serious club, because Simone Inzaghi kept training the team in a certain way, because I was in touch with how often Inter were training and so on and so forth. But perhaps I wasn't necessarily, you know, perhaps you're not, unconsciously you're not as applied once you've won the league so early. You know, there's a couple of players there, a couple of players got injured as well. I decided to pick a lone striker, and I went with a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-2-1. But we didn't see the quality that you need to display apart from the first game. We showed it a little bit against Croatia in the second half, And when we are forced to play at high tempo, we're not able to combine high tempo in terms of our players' attributes and also to show quality at that high tempo, to show the quality that we possess. Because when we won the ball back, because at times we won the ball back tonight and then we often lost possession immediately because we're not doing a good job in terms of interpreting the space that the opposition afford us. And so it all becomes that much more challenging. But ultimately, the big difference tonight was the intensity. That's not an excuse, though. You know, if we failed, we failed. And we failed because of my team selection and in terms of the way I conducted myself. It's never down to the players. And similarly, just as I was saying before, in terms of the experience that I've had available to me in terms of being able to experiment, I haven't had a great deal of scope to experiment. So, of course, you do need a bit more of an engine in terms of what we saw. As for one formation or another, ultimately you need a better engine. Otherwise, you know, you might sit back, you might go and press them high. You know, if you do win the ball back, but then 6 of them close them down. It's very hard to play football in those conditions. I'd like to come back to what Andrea was just asking, because I think that's crucial. It gets right to the crux of the matter. Between now and the World Cup qualifying campaign and the Nations League campaign, if the defenders aren't quick, if it's hard for you to play one against one, if in the middle of the park you don't have that change of pace and we struggle in the final third to score goals for a whole host of reasons, I'm giving you lots of different excuses now, not just one. But unless 3 or 4 players suddenly appear who are above this level that can then compete against those who are our natural rivals over the course of football history, unless we have these 3 or 4 players suddenly coming through, I don't know how, that's nothing to do with you, of course, but is it right to say, yes, I can't play that brand of football and you need to settle for something a little bit less ambitious and say, okay, we're going to set up in a certain way, because if you don't have 3 or 4 match-winning players, talk is cheap. But ultimately, that's what football comes down to. That's just my impression, though. The results have said that we need to change things. That's been the footballing verdict, and I'll be forced to do so. In terms of my analysis, those are the situations I've been looking at. But when I took charge of Italy, I tried to consider a whole host of different factors, because it was going to be quite hard to predict what was going to come to pass. You do need a bit of experience on the pitch itself, otherwise it becomes very difficult. I don't know whether there will be something different. But these are tests that we need to undertake, and I'm forced to test things out, to try things out. There's no alternative. But, you know, I don't mean any harm to anyone. You know, there's no blame to anyone. I want to stress this because I don't want to have expressed any doubt about this. The responsibility for what happened is mine. It's never down to the players. I'm always with the players, and I'd like to thank them for having brought me here, because otherwise you always need to say the same things in terms of where I started from, you know, coming and playing a game like this. So it's an incredible feeling to be here with our players. But I've got no fear. I've got no fear to come here. You know, when you want to scare me, or when you want to say, okay, now what, now what? In order for me to make it here, that's what it's always come down to. That's always been my process. I have come under pressure right from day one, ever since I decided to become a coach to make it this far. I'm now here And I'm very relaxed in trying to compete at this level. And in the previous game, I came off the pitch and then you immediately hear comments, what's been said, you're told what hasn't been said. And I would have expected, what our reaction was against Croatia, that is. I would have expected right up until the end, okay, come on lads, we can do it, because we're still in the game. But no. A number of players were given 4 out of 10. People are saying it was scandalous. So then, I have to react. Because I'm not just going to stand by and listen to that. Yes, you do feel pressure. They probably feel pressure more than I do because, they've always played in great, prestigious clubs. But, I've been seeking out this pressure day in, day out, working day in, day out over a number of years. So maybe I've done things the wrong way. But you try and actually take the sting out of things. You try and, in terms of pressure, not load too much pressure up on the players. But then things like this happen tonight and the responsibility's mine. And that's it. No one else takes the blame. And I'm willing to speak to anyone. There's no issue. Ask me as many questions as you like. I'm happy to answer. There's no issues at all. This guy over here. There will be another press conference tomorrow, so one final question from the foreign press.
Ja. Entschuldigen Sie die Metapher, aber kann es sein, dass Italien heute ein Fiat Panda war?
I apologize for this metaphor, but were Italy like a Fiat Panda tonight and Switzerland were like a Ferrari? What can you say about Switzerland and this metaphor I said?
Perché non c'è traduzione.
Do it again.
Repeat, please.
Noch ein Wort zur Schweiz bitte und entschuldigen Sie die Metapher.
What are your thoughts about Switzerland? I apologize for the metaphor.
Ma io non la sento.
È un metafora, si è detto che la Svizzera è una macchina Ferrari e stasera l'Italia è stato un Fiat Panda.
Un?
Fiat Panda.
Fiat Panda.
Questa è la domanda.
Una Ferrari e una Fiat Panda.
Bisogna accettare tutto.
You have to accept everything.
Allusioni di cattivo gusto come la sua.
Even rather tasteless illusions like yours. When you lose, you accept everything. You're clearly a wonderful exponent of sarcasm. And you're right. What can we say? You did a better job than us. You were worthy winners.
E cercheremo di fare meglio la prossima volta.
And we'll try and do better next time.
Non vi abbiamo impegnato stasera.
Given that we didn't really cause you
Come si chiama lei? What's your name?
much of an issue tonight.
What's your name? You?
Sì, il nome è
You must.
Sì, sto chiedendo.
What's your name?
Your name and your company.
Name.
Sebastian Rieder.
Reader?
Ja.
And newspaper?
20 Minuten, 20 Minuten.
20 minuti.
Thank you, Mr. River. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scusi.
Sì, Reader. E volevamo ricordarvi che domani intorno alle 12 stiamo definendo il programma a Casa Azzurri, tempo che rientrate, chi non può fare in tempo si può collegare in collegamento su Zoom o altre piattaforme.
We wanted to remind you that at Casa Azzurri will be holding another press conference, but the FIGC, the Italian FA President Gabriele Gravina, and the head coach will speak tomorrow in a press conference. Thank you.